A Trump supporter went out for a bite to eat with a few friends at a Texas restaurant. After finishing their meal, he went to the register to pay with a single $20 bill. Much to his surprise, the cashier was a liberal who quickly called the cops after seeing what was on the back of the money that he was just handed. David Hill posted an account of an ordeal on Facebook, explaining the unexpected chain of events he was met with when he wanted to spend some time with his buddies at an unnamed Texas restaurant. After deciding where to meet, Hill and his friends headed to a local eatery to enjoy some conversation and a few laughs. However, things would take a turn when it was time to pay the bill. Unknowingly, the $20 bill I had in my wallet had "Trump lives here" written in permanent marker on the White House, Hill explained. However, those 3 words were all it took for all hell to break loose with the employee, who was none too pleased to see what was written on the bill. The cashier looks at it and says, "I can't take this money, it's invalid because it's been defaced," Hill recalled. Stunned, he asked if the cashier was serious, only to be left even more shocked when the liberal firmly held his ground, asking if the customer had another form of payment. At that point, it was a matter of principle, so Hill stuck to his guns as well, telling the cashier that the cash was all he had on him. Leaving the customer even more aghast, the cashier suggested Hill go to a nearby ATM, get some more money, and return to the restaurant to settle the tab. Frustrated, David simply looked the employee in the eye and said, "Nope, the money works, you can take it." With the two at a deadlock, the employee threatened to call the police, but the threat was welcomed by the Trump supporter. As a small group of onlookers gathered, a police officer arrived and asked the usual question, "What seems to be the problem here?" Before Hill could respond, the cashier piped up with a bold accusation. "This man is attempting to pass counterfeit currency which has been defaced, and I'm not accepting it," he told the officer. Of course, the cop demanded to see the bill, but the cashier didn't get the reaction that he had hoped for after the officer took a closer look at the money. "Son, there are millions of bills with writing on them, and it is valid currency, so kindly take it and give the gentleman his change," the officer informed the employee after examining the bill. But things were far from over. Shocking everyone, including Hill and the responding police officer, the cashier replied, "Nope, I'm not taking it." When the officer asked why not, the employee revealed his motives. "Because anything with Trump's name on it disgusts me. He's not my president," the employee declared. Things weren't going to go in his favor, though. After pausing for a second, the cop said, "Oh, here's the deal. Take the money and give the gentleman his proper change, or his lunch is free today because he's trying to pay you for the meal." Much to everyone's surprise, the liberal cashier would rather give the Trump supporter a free meal than take the money, so he refused the payment again. Seeing that the employee wasn't going to change his mind, the officer turned to Hill and said, "Have a nice day, sir. You are free to go." Then he turned to the cashier with a warning. "I guess when word gets out that meals are free if Trump's name is written on a $20 bill on the White House, this place will get swamped with people wanting to eat for free," the officer pointed out. What's more, when his boss finds out he's been costing the business money due to his personal political motivation, he's likely to be out of a job. While defacing a bill is frowned upon, as it turns out, this cop knew what he was talking about. According to U.S. Code 18 U.S. Code SS 333, it's technically only illegal to deface money to the point that it is rendered unusable. Since this was only written on and the bill could still do its job, it was legal tender, meaning that a cashier would have to take it. Furthermore, if you are working with the public, you need to learn to leave your own political bias at home and treat all paying customers the same. This employee should have taken the cash, just like Hill would have to accept his change if it had a message plastered on it that he didn't like. The officer's comment about free meals struck a nerve with the onlookers, sparking laughter from some and uncomfortable silence from others. Hill couldn't help but smirk, feeling both amused and validated. The cop's remark hinted at the absurdity of the situation. Could this liberal cashier actually refuse payment over political reasons? It was clear that the officer was subtly implying that this kind of behavior could lead to the restaurant's reputation taking a hit. The onlookers started to murmur among themselves, with a few expressing disbelief at the employee's stance. A couple of Hill's friends chimed in, urging the cashier to accept the money and move on, emphasizing that they were all there to enjoy a good meal without any drama. The cashier, however, held firm, still insisting he would not accept Trump money. It was as if the message on the bill had personally offended him, and he seemed unwilling to let it slide. Frustrated by the continued resistance, the officer sighed and decided to have a word with the manager. When the manager arrived, he seemed both surprised and embarrassed by the whole ordeal. He listened as the officer recounted what had transpired, explaining that the $20 bill was valid and that refusing it over a simple scribble was unnecessary and potentially damaging for business. "Look," the manager began, glancing between the cashier and the officer. "This isn't the kind of place where we turn away customers over political messages on currency." He then turned to Hill, apologizing for the disruption and assuring him that they appreciated his business. "I understand how politics can be a sensitive subject," he continued, "but we're here to serve everyone equally." Despite the manager's efforts to mediate, the cashier still appeared visibly upset, mumbling under his breath about how he couldn't believe he was being forced to serve someone like that. It became clear to the manager that a private conversation with the employee might be in order after the lunch rush ended. As the crowd watched, the manager pulled the cashier aside and had a few quiet words with him, after which the employee returned with a slightly resigned look. Finally, the cashier, though clearly begrudging, rang up Hill's order and counted out his change. He handed it over without making eye contact, and Hill could feel the tension in the air. Nevertheless, he accepted his change politely, resisting the urge to gloat or make a scene. After all, he'd come to the restaurant to enjoy time with friends, not to provoke anyone. The officer lingered for a moment, ensuring that the transaction was completed without further issues. Before leaving, he glanced over his shoulder and offered a final piece of advice to the cashier, saying, "Remember, everyone has a right to their opinion, but when you're on the clock, it's your job to serve the customer." With a nod to Hill and his friends, the officer departed, leaving the restaurant in a state of awkward silence. As Hill and his friends finished up their meal, they couldn't help but chuckle over how a simple meal had turned into such a spectacle. They recounted the bizarre chain of events, laughing over how far the cashier had gone to make a statement. Hill reflected on the incident, feeling grateful for the officer's professionalism and the manager's attempt to smooth things over. On their way out, Hill and his friends noticed a few other patrons giving them thumbs up, clearly showing their support. Some even mentioned they'd return to the restaurant in the future not to make trouble but to enjoy a meal without fear of political judgment. This incident had shown them how divisive things could get, yet it was also a reminder that common sense usually prevails. As they left, Hill took one last look back, wondering if the cashier had learned anything from the incident. He couldn't be sure, but he hoped that the experience might serve as a lesson on tolerance and professionalism. After all, they were all just people trying to get by, and everyone deserved to be treated with respect regardless of differing beliefs. As Hill and his friends walked to the parking lot, they reflected on the incident, realizing it was a small glimpse of the broader political tension that seemed to be affecting people everywhere. It was just a meal at a restaurant, but the way the cashier reacted reminded them of how divided people had become. Despite this, Hill couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction that the officer and the manager had both prioritized fairness over political bias. On the drive home, Hill thought about posting his experience on social media to see if others had encountered similar situations. He hoped his story might encourage people to look past their differences, even if it was just for the time it took to complete a transaction. So he wrote up the entire encounter, sharing every detail, and posted it for his friends and family to see. Within minutes, comments started pouring and some people shared their own stories, while others expressed disbelief that politics could seep into something as trivial as paying for a meal. One friend commented, "Unbelievable. We've gotten to the point where a simple phrase on a $20 bill can spark so much conflict." Another added, "Glad to see the officer stood his ground. We need more people willing to keep things fair, no matter what side they're on." Hill smiled, realizing he wasn't alone in his feelings and that his post had struck a chord with others who were tired of political tensions affecting everyday interactions. The post quickly gained traction, circulating well beyond Hill's circle of friends. People from across the country began to weigh in, sharing mixed reactions. Some applauded the officer and the manager for handling things maturely, while others took the cashier's side, arguing that everyone has a right to refuse service. But Hill wasn't looking to start a heated debate. He only wanted to share a moment that highlighted the importance of mutual respect. As he read through the comments, Hill hoped that maybe, just maybe, people would come away from his story with a reminder to focus on what truly matters: kindness, tolerance, and treating each other with decency. He couldn't control people's reactions, but he felt he'd done his part in promoting a little understanding amid the noise of division. Later that night, as Hill was winding down, he received a message from the restaurant's manager. The manager thanked him for his patience and apologized once again for the uncomfortable situation, assuring Hill that he valued every customer regardless of their political beliefs. The message ended on a hopeful note, with the manager expressing his commitment to making the restaurant a welcoming place for everyone. Hill appreciated the gesture. It was a small reminder that, Even amid disagreements, there were people willing to bridge divides. Smiling, Hill replied, expressing his gratitude and his hope that the restaurant could keep that promise, knowing it would go a long way in bringing people together over something as simple as a shared meal.